Ardennes, December 1944. Just after 0900 hours, the lead M4 Sherman of Company C, 3rd Armored Division, crested a snow-dusted rise, its commander scanning the frozen valley below, unaware that the seemingly benign, distant tree line concealed a silent, camouflaged hunter. This encounter, a sudden ambush that decimated an entire American tank platoon in less than 2 minutes, would starkly redefine the perception of German armored doctrine for many Allied crews, forcing them to confront the lethal efficiency of a weapon they had largely dismissed as a mere self-propelled gun. The stakes were immediate and brutal: survival in a war zone where assumptions could be fatal. The M4 crews, fresh from the relative ease of the French plains, had grown accustomed to the silhouette of the Panzer IV and the formidable, though increasingly rare, Tiger. Their training emphasized tank-on-tank engagements, focusing on turreted adversaries that presented a predictable profile of armor and armament. They understood the concept of a tank destroyer, like their own M10, as a mobile anti-tank platform, but the German Sturmgeschütz, or StuG, was often seen through the lens of early intelligence reports as primarily an infantry support vehicle, a heavily armored assault gun, lacking the flexibility of a rotating turret, and therefore less of a direct threat to their own armored formations. This prevailing view was rooted in the StuG 3's original design brief from 1935, which called for a mobile, armored artillery piece to provide close fire support to infantry divisions capable of destroying fortified positions. Its initial armament, a short-barreled 7.5cm StuG 37 L24 gun, reinforced this perception. Production logs indicate that by 1940, over 300 of these early variants had been fielded, their low-velocity shells proving effective against bunkers but posing little danger to the frontal armor of a Sherman at range. American crews often referred to them derisively as tin cans or fixed guns, underestimating their potential evolution. However, the rapid escalation of tank warfare on the Eastern Front, particularly the shock of encountering the Soviet T-34, forced a radical reevaluation of the StuG's role. German engineers, under intense pressure, quickly upgunned the platform. The StuG 3 Ausf, appearing in 1942, mounted the long-barreled 7.5cm StuG 40 L43, a weapon capable of penetrating the frontal armor of most Allied tanks at combat ranges. This was followed by the L48 version, which became the standard, offering even greater muzzle velocity and penetration. These later models transformed the StuG from an assault gun into a highly effective tank killer, a fact not fully appreciated by many American units until direct, devastating engagement. The tactical implications of this evolution were profound. Without a turret, the StuG presented a significantly lower profile than a conventional tank, making it exceptionally difficult to spot and target, especially when expertly camouflaged in defensive positions. Its fixed gun meant the entire vehicle had to traverse to aim, a perceived disadvantage that German crews often turned into an asset by employing ambush tactics, lying in wait and firing from concealed positions before relocating. This method of engagement minimized exposure and maximized the element of surprise, leveraging the StuG's robust frontal armor and powerful main gun against unsuspecting enemy formations. The StuG 3 and later StuG 4, built on the Panzer IV chassis, became the most produced German armored fighting vehicle of the war, with over 10,000 units manufactured across all variants. This sheer volume meant that despite their initial classification, StuGs were encountered with increasing frequency on all fronts, often filling the gaps left by dwindling tank production. Their operational cost was lower than a Panther or Tiger, requiring fewer resources and less time to build, making them an indispensable component of the Wehrmacht's defensive strategy. This widespread deployment ensured that what American intelligence had initially categorized as a secondary threat would, through sheer numbers and tactical adaptation, become a primary concern on the battlefield. The lead Sherman, its M4A3 hull, a familiar silhouette against the scarred landscape, moved with a confidence born of recent success. Its commander, peering through the open hatch, scanned the tree line, a habitual gesture of caution, but one that held no premonition of the immediate, devastating future. The platoon, 4 tanks strong, advanced in a loose column, their tracks churning the soft earth, each vehicle a 30-ton statement of American industrial might. A flash, almost imperceptible, erupted from a copse of firs to their left, followed by a sound that was less a roar and more a sharp, concussive crack. The lead Sherman lurched violently, its turret momentarily skewing before a blossoming inferno consumed the front of the tank. The 75mm main gun, once a symbol of its offensive capability, was now a twisted, inert mass. Damage reports later confirmed a direct hit to the glacis plate, a penetration achieved by a projectile with an estimated muzzle velocity far exceeding that of standard anti-tank rounds encountered previously. The projectile, likely a PZGAR-39, impacted with over 6.5 megajoules of kinetic energy, sufficient to defeat 76 millimeters of face-hardened armor at that range. The internal spalling and subsequent ignition of ammunition stores rendered the tank a total loss within seconds. The second Sherman, reacting to the sudden catastrophe, began to traverse its turret, its crew attempting to pinpoint the source of the attack. Before its 75mm gun could bear, a second flash, equally swift and deadly, struck the side of its hull. The impact tore through the thinner side armor, designed for protection against lighter anti-tank weapons, not the concentrated force now unleashed upon them. Interrogation files from captured German personnel would later reveal the ambush was executed by a single Sturmgeschütz 3, Aust 4G, positioned with a clear line of fire and excellent concealment. This particular variant mounted the long-barreled 7.5cm StuG 40 L48 gun, a weapon capable of generating 1.2 times the penetration power of the short-barreled 7.5cm KWK-37 found on earlier models. Its low profile, a mere 2.15 meters in height, allowed it to blend seamlessly into the dense undergrowth. The third Sherman, attempting to maneuver for a counterattack, found its path blocked by the burning wreck of its lead comrade. As its driver wrestled with the controls, a third round struck the engine deck, igniting the fuel tanks. The resulting explosion lifted the tank momentarily from its tracks, a geyser of flame and smoke marking its demise. The final Sherman, its crew now in a state of disarray, attempted to reverse, its tracks grinding futilely against the terrain. A final precise shot from the unseen assailant struck its transmission housing, immobilizing the vehicle. The crew, trapped and vulnerable, abandoned the tank under a hail of machine gun fire, leaving behind a scene of utter devastation. The entire engagement lasted less than 90 seconds. The morning light, filtered through the shattered remnants of the forest canopy, revealed the full extent of the ambush. American reconnaissance teams, cautiously advancing, found a scene of profound destruction. 3 M4 Sherman tanks, once formidable symbols of Allied power, lay broken and burning, their turrets wrenched from their rings, their armor peeled back like tin cans. Damage reports, filed later that day, meticulously cataloged the catastrophic failures. The lead Sherman, courageous, had taken a direct hit to its frontal glacis plate, the round penetrating the 63.5 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor and detonating the ammunition stowage. The resulting internal explosion had ripped the tank apart, scattering components over a 50-meter radius. The second Sherman, Vanguard, struck on its left sponson, suffered a catastrophic fire that consumed its interior, melting the breech of its 75mm gun. Forensic analysis of the impact craters and projectile fragments confirmed the weapon used, a 7.5cm Panzerabwehrkanone 40. This high-velocity anti-tank gun, standard armament on the Sturmgeschütz 3, was capable of firing a PZGR-39 projectile with a muzzle velocity of 790 meters per second, delivering over 1.5 megajoules of kinetic energy upon impact. The round's hardened steel core, designed for armor penetration, had proven devastatingly effective against the Sherman's frontal and side protection. The tactical implications of this encounter were immediately apparent. American doctrine, which largely viewed the Sturmgeschütz as a mobile artillery piece, had underestimated its anti-tank capabilities. The StuG-3, with its low silhouette and fixed superstructure, presented a smaller target than a conventional tank, making it exceptionally difficult to spot and engage, especially from a prepared ambush position. Its production numbers, exceeding 10,000 units by 1944, indicated its widespread deployment and potential threat across the European theater. This incident forced a re-evaluation of threat assessments and crew training. The perception of the StuG as merely a support weapon had cost an entire platoon. The brutal efficiency of the ambush underscored a critical vulnerability in Allied armored tactics, demanding a more comprehensive understanding of the enemy's diverse and evolving arsenal. The quiet wreckage served as a stark, undeniable lesson. Normandy, July 1944. The M4 Sherman, its turret blown clear and resting 20 yards distant, offered a stark lesson. American tank crews, accustomed to the relative safety of their armored vehicles, now confronted a new disturbing reality. An enemy they had underestimated, a weapon they had misidentified, had just annihilated an entire platoon. This incident, stark in its finality, forced a re-evaluation of battlefield intelligence and tactical doctrine. The initial assessment of the destroyed M4s revealed a consistent pattern of penetration. The armor plate, nominally 63 millimeters thick on the glacis and 76 millimeters on the turret front, showed clean, circular entry points. These were not the jagged, spalling wounds typical of high-explosive anti-tank rounds, but rather the precise punctures indicative of high-velocity kinetic energy penetrators. The impact angles suggested engagements from concealed positions, often at ranges exceeding 800 meters. Damage reports from the 3rd Armored Division, meticulously compiled in the immediate aftermath, cataloged 4 M4A1 Shermans completely destroyed, with an additional 2 M4A3s severely damaged and rendered inoperable. The loss of life was equally grim: 24 American tankers killed, with another 8 wounded. This single engagement represented a significant tactical setback, far exceeding the typical attrition rates for a localized skirmish. The weapon responsible, initially dismissed as a towed anti-tank gun, began to reveal its true nature through the forensic examination of the battlefield. Tracks in the soft earth, distinct from those of a Panzer IV or Panther, indicated a vehicle with a lower profile and a wider track footprint. Spent shell casings, recovered near suspected fiery positions, bore the distinct markings of 7.5 centimeter KWK-40 L48 ammunition, a projectile far more potent than the 5-centimeter rounds commonly encountered. Interrogation files from captured German infantry, specifically from elements of the 21st Panzer Division, began to corroborate the emerging picture. These prisoners, often demoralized but surprisingly candid, spoke of Sturmgeschütze, assault guns, being deployed in defensive roles. They described these vehicles as low-slung, heavily armored, and capable of delivering devastating fire, often from static, camouflaged positions. The technical examination of the M4 wreckage provided further, chilling details. The penetrations consistently occurred in the frontal arc, often through the driver's or bow gunner's station, or directly into the ammunition stowage areas. The resulting internal explosions, evidenced by the twisted steel and charred interiors, indicated a catastrophic kill. The lack of discernible turret traverse on the part of the attacking vehicle suggested a fixed main armament, a defining characteristic of the assault gun. Production logs from German armaments factories, later obtained through intelligence channels, confirmed the increasing output of the Sturmgeschütz III StuG. By mid-1944, monthly production rates had stabilized at approximately 350 units, a significant number that belied its initial classification as a niche support vehicle. Its 7.5-centimeter KWK-40 L-48 main gun, originally designed for anti-tank roles, possessed a muzzle velocity of 790 meters per second, capable of penetrating 90 millimeters of RHA at 500 meters, a performance profile far exceeding the M4 Sherman's frontal armor protection. The strategic implication of this discovery was profound. American forces had been operating under the assumption that the primary armored threat came from tanks with rotating turrets, allowing for dynamic engagements. The StuG III, with its casemate design, forced a reevaluation of engagement tactics, emphasizing reconnaissance, flank attacks, and the coordinated use of infantry support to neutralize these static, ambush predators. Its low silhouette made it notoriously difficult to spot, especially when dug in or camouflaged. The ideological underpinning of the StuG III, rooted in its original role as infantry support, had evolved into a potent defensive weapon. Its simplicity of design, lower production cost compared to a fully traversable tank, and its effectiveness in static defense made it a formidable adversary. This was not a tank in the conventional sense, but a mobile gun platform, optimized for surprise and destruction, a specialized instrument of attrition that demanded a new respect. The battlefield itself became the ultimate classroom, teaching a harsh lesson in the evolution of armored warfare. The quiet, methodical work of ordnance teams, sifting through the wreckage, piecing together the narrative of destruction, underscored the critical need for accurate intelligence and adaptable tactics. The StuG III, once an obscure footnote in Allied intelligence briefings, had now etched itself into the grim reality of the American tanker's experience. The mangled remains of the Sherman tanks, some still smoldering days later, provided grim evidence for the intelligence officers who arrived to sift through the wreckage. Their initial assessment focused on the shell fragments embedded in the armor, the precise entry and exit points, and the distinct patterns of penetration. These physical clues, combined with the few coherent eyewitness accounts from the shell-shocked survivors, began to paint a picture of an engagement far more devastating than any previous encounter with German armor. Analysis of the projectile fragments revealed a consistent caliber of 7.5 centimeters, yet the kinetic energy transfer suggested a higher muzzle velocity than typically associated with the Panzer IV's main gun. The damage reports meticulously documented clean perforations through the Sherman's 51mm frontal glacis plate, indicating a weapon capable of defeating standard American medium tank protection at combat ranges. This level of penetration was anomalous for the known German tank inventory in the sector. Further examination of the battlefield, particularly the ambush site, revealed subtle but critical details. Tracks in the soft earth, though partially obscured by the ensuing chaos, showed a distinct pattern. Wider than a Panzer III, yet lacking the characteristic overlapping road wheels of a Panther or Tiger. The absence of a turret ring, a feature common to all German tanks encountered thus far, was also noted by the reconnaissance teams. Interrogation files from recently captured German prisoners of war, cross-referenced with translated enemy equipment manuals, began to clarify the mystery. Repeated mentions emerged of a Sturmgeschütz, or assault gun, a vehicle designed for direct fire support against fortifications and infantry. Production logs indicated that by late 1943, the Sturmgeschütz III, armed with a long-barreled 7.5-centimeter StuG 48 gun, was being manufactured at a rate exceeding 1,000 units per month, making it the most prolifically produced German armored fighting vehicle. This revelation profoundly altered the tactical understanding of German armored capabilities. The StuG, effectively a tank destroyer built on a Panzer III chassis, presented a low silhouette and a powerful main gun, making it an ideal ambush predator. Its operational doctrine emphasized concealed positions and sudden, devastating fire, a stark contrast to the more conventional tank-on-tank engagements American crews had been trained to expect. The intelligence summary, circulated among battalion and regimental commanders, identified the new threat with chilling clarity: a turretless, heavily armed vehicle, masquerading as a mere support gun, but possessing the lethality to decimate an armored platoon in seconds. The American tank crews had not merely faced a gun. They had faced a weapon system optimized for their destruction. The reports from the decimated platoon, painstakingly pieced together from the few survivors and the grim evidence of the battlefield, forced a reevaluation. American tank crews had consistently categorized German armored vehicles into a simple binary: tanks or tank destroyers. The StuG, with its low silhouette and fixed superstructure, had been initially dismissed as a less capable, self-propelled artillery piece, a gun that merely moved under its own power, not a dedicated anti-tank platform. This fundamental misunderstanding of its tactical role proved devastating. The StuG 3 StuG, the variant most commonly encountered, mounted a long-barreled 7.5 cm StuG K40 L48 main gun. This weapon, while technically an assault gun cannon, possessed ballistic characteristics and armor penetration capabilities nearly identical to the KWK-40 L48 found on the Panzer IV, a vehicle unequivocally recognized as a main battle tank. The M4 Sherman's 75mm gun, firing M61 armor-piercing capped ballistic capped rounds, could penetrate approximately 88mm of face-hardened armor at 500 meters. The StuG 40 L48, with its standard PZ Grar 39 round, could defeat 96mm at the same range, presenting a clear and often fatal advantage in a frontal engagement. Production figures further underscored the StuG's pervasive presence. By the end of 1943, Alkit and MEAG, the primary manufacturers, had delivered over 6,000 StuG 3 StuGs, making it the most produced German armored fighting vehicle of the war. This sheer volume meant that encounters were not isolated incidents, but a systemic threat across all fronts. Its design, eschewing a rotating turret for a fixed casemate, significantly reduced manufacturing complexity and material cost, allowing for rapid mass production at a time when Germany's industrial capacity was increasingly strained. This design choice, initially seen as a limitation by Allied intelligence, was in fact its strength for specific tactical applications. The absence of a turret allowed for thicker frontal armor, often reaching 80mm on the superstructure, angled effectively to increase its nominal thickness. This, combined with its low profile, made it an ideal ambush predator, capable of concealing itself in terrain and delivering powerful, accurate fire from unexpected positions before relocating. It was not designed for the fluid, maneuver warfare of a tank, but for direct fire support and, crucially, for defensive anti-tank operations. The realization dawned that the StuG was not a second-tier weapon to be underestimated. It was a purpose-built instrument of destruction, a highly effective and economic solution to the demands of a protracted war, capable of inflicting disproportionate casualties when employed correctly. Its deployment doctrine emphasized surprise and concentrated fire, turning what appeared to be a static gun into a mobile, lethal ambush platform. The American crews had learned, at a terrible cost, that a gun that moved was not merely a gun, but a hunter. The shock of the ambush, the sudden, brutal efficiency of the StuG, reverberated through the American armored divisions. Commanders, faced with stark damage reports detailing the loss of 14 Sherman tanks and 3 M3 half-tracks in a single engagement, began to reassess the enemy's capabilities. The perception of the StuG as a mere towed artillery piece, easily outmaneuvered and outgunned by the M4 Sherman, fractured under the weight of these losses. Training regimens, previously focused on aggressive flanking maneuvers against perceived tank threats, began to incorporate new scenarios. Recognition manuals, once giving cursory attention to the low-slung silhouette of the Sturmgeschütz, now highlighted its frontal armor and the potent 7.5 centimeters StuG 40 L48 main gun. Intelligence briefings emphasized the StuG's role as an ambush predator, a static, concealed hunter rather than a mobile brawler. Field modifications, born of necessity and desperation, started to appear. Crews welded spare track links, sandbags, and even concrete to the glacis plates of their Shermans, attempting to thicken the frontal protection against the StuG's high-velocity rounds. While often ineffective against direct hits from the StuG 40 at close range, these improvisations reflected a growing understanding of the threat and a desire for any marginal advantage. Tactical doctrine shifted, moving away from unsupported tank charges against suspected enemy positions. Infantry-tank cooperation, always a theoretical ideal, became a practical necessity. Infantry patrols were now routinely deployed ahead of armored columns, tasked with flushing out hidden anti-tank positions and identifying potential ambush sites before the tanks committed. The M10 Wolverine tank destroyer, with its open-top turret and lighter armor, found its specific role re-emphasized. Its 3-inch, 76.2mm M7 gun, while still struggling against the frontal armor of heavier German tanks, possessed sufficient penetrating power to engage StuGs at reasonable combat ranges. The Wolverine crews, initially frustrated by their limited armor, found a renewed purpose in hunting these elusive, dangerous vehicles. Artillery support, previously considered a general suppression tool, was now integrated more precisely into anti-StuG tactics. Forward observers, often accompanying the lead infantry elements, were trained to identify and call in fire missions on suspected StuG positions, aiming to disrupt their firing lines or force them to relocate before they could engage the main armored force. The static nature of the StuG, while an advantage in ambush, also made it vulnerable to accurate preparatory barrages. The psychological impact on tank crews was profound. The complacency that had sometimes accompanied engagements against less formidable German armor evaporated. Every hedgerow, every copse of trees, every reverse slope became a potential hiding place for a camouflaged StuG. The battlefield, once seen as a domain of maneuver and direct engagement, now held a new, silent menace. This adaptation was not instantaneous, nor was it without cost. Further engagements confirmed the StuG's lethality, each encounter adding to the growing body of knowledge and refining the countermeasures. The learning curve was steep, paid for in steel and lives, but it forged a more cautious, more effective armored force. The StuG, once dismissed, had forced a fundamental reevaluation of American tank warfare. The stark lessons of the StuG's effectiveness permeated the armored doctrine, forcing a critical reevaluation of established tactical assumptions. No longer could American tank crews operate under the comfortable illusion that every tracked vehicle encountered would present a turreted silhouette, an obvious gun barrel protruding from a rotating cupola. The ambush on the Platoon, dissected in after-action reports and training manuals, underscored the vulnerability of even well-armored formations to concealed, low-profile threats. The StuG's design, initially conceived as an infantry support weapon, had evolved into a formidable tank destroyer, its fixed superstructure and powerful main gun proving an economical and lethal combination. Production logs from Alcat and MIAG factories indicated a steady output, with monthly figures consistently exceeding 200 units by late 1943, reaching a peak of over 1,000 in late 1944. This sheer volume ensured their widespread presence across the European theater, transforming them from an occasional curiosity into a persistent, deadly adversary. The implications extended beyond mere recognition. The StuG's low profile, a characteristic born of its casemate design, allowed it to exploit terrain features with an uncanny ease that turreted tanks could not match. It could hull down in shallow depressions, its squat form blending seamlessly with the contours of the landscape, presenting only a minimal target to advancing forces. This tactical advantage, once underestimated, became a central point of study in armored reconnaissance and counter-ambush drills. American tank commanders, initially trained to identify and engage tanks by their distinctive turrets, now faced the necessity of adapting their visual recognition protocols. The silhouette of a StuG, with its boxy, fixed superstructure, demanded a different kind of vigilance, a more nuanced understanding of enemy capabilities. The absence of a rotating turret, once perceived as a limitation, was now understood as a design choice that maximized armor protection and simplified gun mounting, allowing for the integration of increasingly powerful main armaments. Sherman, with its relatively high profile and visible turret, found itself at a disadvantage in engagements where the StuG could exploit cover and surprise. The 75mm gun of early Shermans, while effective against most German medium tanks, struggled with the frontal armor of later StuG variants, particularly when engaging at range or from unfavorable angles. This disparity in protection and firepower, exacerbated by the StuG's tactical deployment, contributed to a growing sense of unease within American armored units. The intelligence reports, compiled from captured documents and interrogations, painted a picture of a versatile and resilient weapon system. German crews, often veterans of the Eastern Front, had perfected the art of ambush with the StuG, leveraging its inherent stealth and formidable firepower. Their tactics, once dismissed as defensive, were now recognized as a potent offensive capability capable of disrupting entire armored thrusts. The StuG's continued presence on the battlefield, even as more advanced German tanks emerged, solidified its reputation as a deceptively dangerous opponent. Its cost-effectiveness and ease of production meant that it remained a staple of German armored formations until the very end of the conflict. The lessons learned from its encounters, often at great cost, fundamentally altered the perception of what constituted a threat on the armored battlefield. The experience of encountering StuGs in ambush scenarios forced a profound shift in American armored doctrine.